A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Elvis.
First and foremostly, what does this latest developments mean to both the US and to Cuba?
I think it's the end of a 54-year standoff between the two, going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs and all that series of events which led to Fidel Castro taking over the government of Cuba, actually in reverse order. Mm-hmm. But because Cuba was aligned with the Soviet Union, it became part of the Cold War. And therefore, the United States took action against Cuba and tried to isolate it. Mm-hmm. But as Obama has said, it hasn't worked for 54 years. Why continue?
Yes. Now, the United States and Cuba have both agreed to formally re-establish diplomatic relations and reopen their embassies in the countries. What does that mean? That must be a celebration in both countries.
Oh, yes. And it's rather symbolic because there have always been diplomats from both countries in the two capitals, but not under the heading of embassy. It's been called an interest office or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now they can fly the flag, they can move around fully in the way that diplomats are supposed to do. And so it's as much symbolic as anything else.
How important is this in the bilateral or diplomatic relations between the two countries in terms of opening the two new embassies?
I think it's a step-by-step process. We saw last year Raul Castro, the president of Cuba, shaking hands with Barack Obama, the US president, at Nelson Mandela's funeral ceremonies. We've had various moves gradually to get to that point, and gradually the relationships are being normalized with the role of the Pope also in there, trying to bring the two together.
Now, that handshake that you're talking about, some say that was actually the beginning of opening up the frozen relationship between the two. You agree with that?
Again, symbolically, probably there was some behind-the-scenes talk going on between officials at a lower level, but this is now, the first visible sign that change was coming. Mm-hmm.
Now, prior to the recent developments, that relationship between the US and Cuba was very frosty. Mm. And it seems like that is going to change right now. Do you have the same similar feeling?
Yes, I think what's happening is that the old generation of Cuban Americans who live in Florida particularly, and who are very much opposed to any such move, are almost disappearing from the scene, and the younger generation have a different view. They would actually approve of this change. Mm-hmm. Now, the biggest problem now is that the Republican-controlled Congress is unwilling to make changes, to allow American tourists to travel freely to Cuba and so on. Mm-hmm. And with an election coming up in just over a year's time, it's all about domestic politics as much as about relations between US and Cuba.
So do you have a sense that sentiment might change in terms of America's feeling towards Cuba with the Republicans feeling the way they do?
Well, they've got to assess what their chances in the election are and which is going to benefit them more. As I say, the sentiment among the younger Cubans in Florida, the children of the people who fled from Cuba earlier on, mm-hmm. is different to what their parents was. Mm-hmm. And it may not be to the advantage of the Republicans to maintain this inflexible stance.
Mm-hmm. Now, benefits. Who will benefit more between Cuba and America here? Or will both benefit?
I suppose both will benefit. There'll be more trade between the two, be more tourism for Cuba. Perhaps the very fact that the relations are improved will improve the human rights situation of Cuban citizens, more access to the internet, more freedom to travel themselves. So I think it's, both sides are going to benefit from this. I mean, as Obama pointed out yesterday, the countries are only, 70 miles, 100 kilometers apart or something or other. Mm-hmm. And you've got this standoff, which is a holdover of something that happened back in the 1960s.
Now, we've seen lots of visuals about Cuba and some of the vintage cars that they have there. Mm. That might be gone soon because it seems like the American economy is growing. People are buying more modern cars and they will be able to import them to Cuba.
Yes, I think if you want to experience Cuba as it is today, you must get your visa and go.
Because you're never going to see it again
It's going to change. Yes.
Now, it seems that the Republicans, once again, is against these developments. How is Obama, as a Democrat, going to convince them to change their minds?
I think, as I say, it's more electoral politics. They've got to be convinced that it's in their electoral interest. If they want to maintain control over the Senate and the House of Representatives, they must respond to what the voters want. Mm-hmm. And if they perceive that they want this change, then it will come about. Now, some things Obama can do by executive order. He doesn't have to wait for the Congress. Mm-hmm. But some things like allowing tourism is within the jurisdiction of the legislative branch of government. And so that's, you know, it's a tricky system to try and maneuver your way through, the American one.
Mm-hmm. Now, does the opening of the embassies also mean that the lingering problems over the issues such as Cuba's human rights record will encourage that lifting of the U.S. embargo?
Well, those are problems that I suppose need to be addressed. I think one has to see this as a gradualist approach. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen bang like that. They'll both work away at it. Raul Castro is much more flexible than his brother Fidel, mm-hmm. and has in fact already brought about many, many changes in the way Cuba is run. It's permitting ordinary Cubans to run small businesses. It's not a state-owned economy in every sense of the word. So the change is taking place, and this no doubt will encourage them to change even more.
Mr. Wheeler, as usual, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
My pleasure.
Now that was Tom Wheeler, the former diplomat and independent commentator, chatting to us here on AM News.